Understanding narcissistic abuse means recognizing the patterns narcissists follow to maintain control. Their behaviors are often cyclical: idealize, devalue, discard, and hoover. Recognizing this can help you reclaim your emotional autonomy and start healing. When you decide to go silent, something powerful happens, not just in your life, but in the narcissist's world. Silence isn't passive. It's a deliberate, conscious choice to disengage from manipulation, drama, and the emotional chaos they constantly stir up. And while it may seem like a quiet move from the outside, it's actually one of the most disruptive things you can do to someone who depends on controlling your attention. Narcissists operate on a very basic currency: reaction. They don't necessarily care if you love them or hate them, as long as you're emotionally invested. That energy, your energy, is what keeps their ego fed. When you cry, defend yourself, argue, or even try to reason with them, you're providing that emotional feedback loop they crave. Your pain, confusion, or even your love becomes a tool for them to control the narrative and keep you stuck in their cycle. But when you go quiet, you cut the cord. Suddenly, they're faced with a version of you that no longer dances to their rhythm. And this throws them off completely. It's like pulling the rug out from under someone who thought they built the entire room. You've changed the rules of the game one they thought they'd already won. Going silent means you've stopped explaining yourself. You've stopped apologizing for things that weren't your fault. You're no longer reacting to their provocations or bending under the weight of their manipulation. This lack of engagement strips them of the control they thought they had over you, and make no mistake, this silence is loud to them. It's a confrontation without words. It forces them to face a reality they don't want to acknowledge, that you are no longer emotionally available to be used as a mirror for their ego, that your self-worth is no longer tethered to their approval. It's terrifying for them, because it means losing the influence they once held over your mind, your heart, and your peace. But here's the part you have to remember. Silence is not just about them. It's about you reclaiming the space to think clearly again. It's about finding your center after being emotionally spun in every direction. It's about choosing your mental health over the illusion of harmony. Narcissists often condition you to believe that if you're not constantly engaging, explaining, or fixing things, you're being cold or cruel. That's the trap. But the truth is, silence is sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself. You don't owe anyone access to your mind or your peace, especially not someone who has proven they'll use it against you. When you go quiet, you're not being weak or avoidant. You're being strategic. You're putting down the rope in a tug-of war that was never yours to win. You're showing that your voice matters even when it's not being spoken. And that is where the real power lies. After you go silent, you might think that's the end of it, that your lack of response, your absence, your refusal to feed the chaos will finally bring peace. But what you need to know is this: the moment you pull back, the narcissist doesn't just walk away quietly. In fact, it's usually the exact opposite, that silence. Your silence sets off an internal alarm for them because they sense they're losing control. And control for them isn't just a preference, it's their survival mechanism. The first thing they'll often do is try to pull you back in. This is where things get confusing. One day, you'll get a kind message, maybe an apology, maybe a reminder of the good times. They'll act like they've changed, like they've had some sudden epiphany about what you meant to them. This is what's known as hoovering. Just like a vacuum, they're trying to suck you right back into the cycle. And it doesn't matter if the words are sweet, if the tone is gentle, or if it sounds like they've finally understood what matters is the pattern. What they're really saying is, I'm losing access to you, and I don't like it. When that doesn't work, they may switch tactics. The next phase is often retaliation. The smear campaign begins. Behind closed doors or even in plain sight, they start twisting the story. Suddenly, you're the one who was cruel. You're the one who abandoned them, ignored them, mistreated them. They paint themselves as the victim, and it can feel maddening to watch people believe them. But that's part of the playbook. If they can't have you, they'll try to control how others see you. It's a final attempt to regain control, even if it's only over your reputation. And here's where your silence becomes even more important. Because the moment you break it to defend yourself, to set the record straight, to explain what really happened, you're giving them what they want: engagement. They're not always looking for reconciliation. They're looking for proof they still matter to you, that they can still shake your world, that they can still disrupt your peace. And every time you speak into the chaos, you risk stepping right back into the trap. Sometimes, when neither charm nor sabotage work, they go eerily quiet, but don't mistake that silence for peace. It's often just a recalibration. They're watching, waiting, trying to figure out the next angle. They don't give up easily because they see people as extensions of themselves, not as individuals with their own lives and boundaries. This is why your silence must stay strong, because it's not about ignoring someone. It's about protecting yourself from the emotional warfare they bring with them. So when they act out, when they chase, when they lie, remember this: it's not love. It's control, dressed up in desperate clothing. The moment you choose silence, something unexpected often rises to the surface: your own emotional triggers. It's not just about what the narcissist is doing or not doing anymore. It becomes about what starts bubbling up inside of you. And this part can be just as difficult to navigate because those emotions feel real, raw, and confusing. You might begin to question yourself, and that's exactly what emotional conditioning does. It makes you doubt your decisions even when they're the healthiest ones you could make. One of the first things you may feel is guilt. That voice inside you might say, maybe I'm being too harsh, or they weren't always like this. That guilt doesn't come out of nowhere. It's the result of long-term emotional manipulation where you were trained to prioritize their feelings over your own. You were likely made to feel responsible for their moods, their bad days, their outbursts. So now, even when you're doing something to protect yourself, your body responds as if you're doing something wrong. But guilt isn't always a sign that you've made a mistake. It can also be a sign that you're breaking a toxic pattern. Then there's fear: fear of retaliation, fear of being alone, fear of them moving on like nothing happened and leaving you with the emotional wreckage. That fear is real because narcissists are unpredictable when they lose control. But let me be clear, fear is also a sign that you're stepping into unknown territory, and unknown doesn't mean unsafe. It just means unfamiliar. Every time you resist the urge to respond or explain, you're taking one more step away from the fear and closer to your own freedom. Confusion is another powerful trigger. You might find yourself asking, was it really that bad, or did I overreact? That's the residue of gaslighting. When someone has spent so much time twisting reality, downplaying your pain, or shifting the blame, you start to second guess what actually happened. It's not because you're weak. It's because you were emotionally trained to lose trust in your own perception. And now, as you begin to untangle yourself from that web, clarity won't come all at once. It comes in layers. First through discomfort, then through courage, and finally through truth. These emotional triggers aren't signs that you should turn back. They're signs that you're healing. Healing is messy. It brings up everything you've suppressed to keep the peace. It doesn't always feel empowering in the moment, but it is. Because when you begin to sit with the discomfort instead of running from it or silencing it with another toxic interaction, you're rewiring your nervous system to recognize what safety actually feels like. So if you find yourself overwhelmed by guilt, fear, or confusion after going silent, know this: those emotions are echoes of the past, not indicators of your future. You're not broken. You're not overreacting. You're finally starting to feel what was always there. And that is the beginning of your freedom. There's a moment, sometimes many moments, when you start to wonder if you're the problem. If maybe, just maybe, you were too sensitive. If you're making it a bigger deal than it really was. And that's exactly how narcissistic abuse works. It's not always loud or violent. Often it's subtle. It happens slowly. It's the shift from being heard to being dismissed, from being valued to being criticized, from feeling connected to constantly questioning yourself. Over time, that erodes your inner compass. You stop trusting your instincts. You silence your own voice before anyone else even needs to. That's why it's so important to understand what's actually happening underneath the surface. Narcissistic behavior isn't just about being arrogant or difficult. It's rooted in deep insecurity that gets masked with control, manipulation, and emotional games. They don't just want love. They want power. They want admiration, and they want you to stay small so they can feel big. And the moment you start seeing through that, really seeing it, they feel threatened. Because awareness breaks the illusion. And when the illusion breaks, their control starts to slip. What's really hard is that narcissists aren't terrible all the time. That's part of what keeps people stuck. The highs can feel intoxicating. You remember the charm, the laughter, the way they made you feel like the most important person in the world. But then came the sharp turn, the coldness, the blame, the silent treatment, the way they turned your own words against you. That contrast is not accidental. It's how they condition you to stay. You learn to crave the validation they intermittently give, and you begin to fear the withdrawal of it even more. The internal struggle is real. You start performing emotional gymnastics, trying to avoid conflict, trying to fix things, trying to say the right thing so you don't set them off. That constant mental and emotional monitoring, that's not love, that's survival. And you don't realize how deep it runs until you step back and start to breathe in silence. Then suddenly you hear the noise that was always there, the walking on eggshells, the second guessing, the emotional fatigue, and you wonder how you lived that way for so long. This is where the shift happens. When you can look at their behavior not through the lens of what you did wrong, but through the lens of what they were trying to control. When you begin to see that it was never about your flaws, it was about their fear of losing power. That's why your healing feels like a threat to them. Because a version of you that's awake, aware, and self-trusting doesn't play their game anymore. You don't need anyone to validate what you went through. You felt it, you lived it, and now you're walking out of it. Not because it didn't affect you, but because it no longer defines you. There's something powerful about understanding narcissistic behavior for what it truly is. Not just reacting to it, not just surviving it, but actually seeing the patterns and naming them. That clarity doesn't come easily. At first, it feels like chaos. One moment, you're being praised, adored, put on a pedestal. The next, you're criticized, ignored, made to feel like you're never enough. That confusion isn't random. It's intentional. It's designed to keep you unstable, emotionally dependent, constantly trying to earn back the affection you were once given so freely. But when you start breaking it down, when you step back and study the cycle instead of staying caught in it, everything begins to make sense. Narcissists don't connect through love, they connect through control. and they use charm like a tool. Not because they're deeply loving people, but because they know it's the quickest way to gain your trust, to get you emotionally invested, to hook you. That initial charm, the warmth, the attention, it's real in the sense that it's happening, but it's not rooted in sincerity. It's a performance, and once they feel they have you, the mask begins to slip. The insults start small. Maybe they joke at your expense. Maybe they question your memory or twist a past event just enough to make you doubt yourself. These moments are seeds, tiny moments that seem harmless but slowly chip away at your sense of reality. You begin to wonder if you're imagining things, if maybe you're too sensitive, if you're overreacting. That's gaslighting, and it doesn't just mess with your emotions. It makes you question your own mind. And through all of it, you're conditioned to put them first, their moods, their needs, their comfort. You're walking around trying not to trigger them, trying to avoid the silent treatment or the explosion that always seems to come out of nowhere. Your own feelings, they get buried. Your voice, it gets quieter. Until one day, you realize you don't even recognize yourself anymore. That's not just heartbreak, that's emotional erasure. So the work becomes this: learning that boundaries are not just allowed, they're essential. That saying no is not rude. It's a form of survival, that you don't need to justify your silence, your distance, or your healing. The moment you stop explaining yourself is the moment you start reclaiming your power, and that power doesn't come from fighting them. It comes from no longer needing their approval to feel whole. The truth is, you're not here to fix someone else's broken reflection. You're here to remember your own, and the more clearly you see the pattern, the easier it is to walk away from it, not with bitterness, but with wisdom. One of the hardest parts about choosing silence is not the silence itself. It's what comes with it, the guilt, the second guessing, the inner dialogue that creeps in late at night asking, "Did I do the right thing?" Because you've likely been trained slowly, repeatedly, to feel responsible for other people's emotions, to keep the peace, to fix things. And now, when you finally set a boundary by not responding, by not engaging, it can feel like you're being heartless. But you're not. You're being clear. You're choosing peace over chaos, self-respect over conflict, and sometimes that clarity feels uncomfortable because it's new. Guilt doesn't always show up in big dramatic waves. Sometimes it sneaks in as overthinking. You replay conversations. You wonder if you should have said it differently, explained more, tried harder. But that's what happens when you've spent so long being the emotional caretaker in a dynamic that was never balanced. You were the one bending, compromising, taking the blame just to avoid the storm. So now that you're doing the opposite, now that you're choosing stillness over response, it's no surprise that your nervous system is on edge. It's not used to silence meaning safety, but here's what's real. Guilt is not always truth. Sometimes it's just a reaction to a boundary being enforced for the first time. And healing requires that boundary to stay firm, even when you feel uncertain. Silence doesn't mean you're being cruel. It means you're choosing not to feed a cycle that drained you. It means you're no longer available to be emotionally manipulated, and that's a powerful shift. One way to stay grounded is to remember why you went silent in the first place. Whether you wrote it down, journaled it, or just felt it in your gut, hold on to that truth. Keep it close. That version of you who finally said enough, who decided to protect your peace instead of chasing closure, that's a version of you that deserves to be trusted. When the guilt comes in, let it come, but don't let it speak louder than your truth. Give yourself permission to stop over-explaining. You're allowed to remove yourself from conversations that only exist to drain or confuse you. You don't owe anyone the emotional access to pull you back into patterns you worked hard to escape. If someone constantly makes you feel like you have to justify your boundaries, that's a sign not a relationship worth preserving. Silence is not a wall, it's a doorway into self-respect, into clarity, into healing, and with time, you'll notice the noise inside starts to quiet too. You'll begin to trust that not every reaction deserves a response, and that you don't have to carry guilt just because someone else doesn't like your boundary. This is how you begin to heal, not by explaining your worth, but by standing in it. The moment you start choosing yourself, truly choosing yourself over the patterns that kept you small, you begin to heal, even if it doesn't feel like healing at first. It might feel like grief, like isolation, like standing in a silence that used to scare you, but beneath that discomfort is the beginning of your power. And what you need to understand is that healing doesn't happen in one giant leap. It happens in quiet moments, in small choices, in gentle shifts. It's not about getting it perfect. It's about staying present with yourself even when it's messy. One of the most powerful self-healing strategies you can use is reconnecting with your own voice. After dealing with someone who constantly twisted your words, dismissed your feelings, or made you doubt your own reality, your voice may have gotten buried. You might not even know what you really think or feel anymore. That's okay. Start small, journal, talk to yourself out loud. Sit in silence and notice what thoughts come up. You don't need all the answers, you just need the space to hear yourself again. And the more you listen, the louder your intuition becomes. That's where your truth lives. It was never lost, just silenced. Another important step is validating your own experience. Narcissistic abuse makes you crave external validation because your reality was constantly questioned. But healing is learning to look in the mirror and say, yes, that happened. Yes, it hurt. And yes, I still deserve peace. You don't need someone else to agree with your story in order for it to be real. Your pain is valid. Your memory is valid. Your healing is valid. Give yourself permission to believe yourself again. Then there's the body. Don't forget the body. Emotional trauma doesn't just live in your thoughts. It settles in your nervous system. That tight chest, the shallow breathing, the constant state of alertness, that's your body still bracing for impact. Grounding exercises can help shift that. Go for walks, breathe deeply, stretch, sit outside, let your body know it's safe now. The more you connect with your physical self, the more anchored you'll feel emotionally. Your body wants to help you heal. It just needs a chance to feel peace again. And finally, be compassionate with yourself. You're going to have setbacks. You'll miss them or the idea of them. You'll have days where the silence feels heavy, and days where your mind replays old conversations just to make sense of it all. That's normal. Healing isn't linear, it's layered, and every time you show up for yourself, even just a little, you're rewriting the story. You're saying, I matter, my peace matters, my future matters more than their approval. You don't need to be fully healed to start living like you deserve better. You just have to be willing to stop accepting less.